One of the reasons that I got so interested in Tugboat was that these were companies that had managed to last for long periods of time, and the high percentage of them are family businesses. I mean, they've been handed down from generation to generation. And
What do you think makes them different?
what makes them, there are 7 characteristics that all the Evergreen companies have. And the question that I asked and that I wrote about in Small Giants was, what is it that they consider more important than growing as big as possible, as fast as possible? Since most people who start companies think that the whole idea is to get as big as possible, as fast as
Yeah.
possible. And growth is very important, obviously, but still these are companies that have chosen other paths that they consider more important.
Hey, welcome to The Freedom Experience, the podcast where we explore what it takes to really build a thriving business that aligns with your values and creates lasting impact. I'm your host, John Moncrief, and today I'm joined by someone who's profoundly shaped my thinking on entrepreneurship and purposes, or the purpose of businesses, and that is Bo Burlingham. Bo and I go way back. He was part of my roundtables in the Small Giants community, and over the years he's become not just a friend, but a real mentor. His insights on purpose, leadership, and long-term thinking have influenced so many entrepreneurs, myself included. And for those of you who haven't heard of Bo or his work, he's a celebrated journalist. He's the author of numerous books, including Small Giants, Finish Big, Great Game of Business, and now his latest book, Another Way, which he co-authored with Tugboat Institute founder Dave Wharton. So over the years, Bo's work has challenged the conventional wisdom around business growth. He's helped entrepreneurs to see that there's more to success than just getting bigger faster, growth for the sake of growth. And in this episode, we dive into the Small Giants philosophy, what it truly means to be a small giant, and why some companies choose to be great instead of just big. We also explore this concept or this idea of evergreen companies, something that's at the heart of Dave and Bo's upcoming book, which is due for release in May. And these are businesses that are built to last, to endure across multiple generations. And they embody these 7 key principles that set them apart. So we talk about those and we dig into those. And then Bo and I discuss why evergreen companies have never been more relevant, especially in today's economic climate, and what we as business owners can learn from them. So this conversation is packed with wisdom, whether you're leading a business, thinking about succession, or just curious about what makes a company stand the test of time. If you want to build a business that lasts, that has mojo, that thrives beyond just financial success, this is the episode you won't want to miss. Now, just as a little bit of a sidebar on this one, we did record this episode a little while ago, but I wanted to hold off releasing it in anticipation of Dave and Bo's upcoming book, and I'll put the links to that in the notes below. We had 1 or 2 little sound glitches. I hope those aren't a problem, but let's dive in and welcome Bo. Thank you for coming on today. And I think your work has been incredibly influential for countless entrepreneurs, myself included. And I wanted to take a moment with you and talk about the work that you've done and how it's shaped businesses, especially when it comes to balancing purpose and growth and leadership. And I know we started talking before I hit the record button, but welcome to the show. Thanks for joining today. I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, it's my pleasure, really. I mean, you and I go back a long way. So it's great to have this opportunity to talk to you now.
Yeah, we were talking before we started. It goes back to almost the sort of genesis of Small Giants. And I think I picked up one of your earlier, I don't know whether the Knack or Street, there seemed to be 2 names internationally for it, Streetwise Entrepreneur and the Knack with Norm Brodsky. And that kind of led me into Small Giants. I wasn't sure which one was published first, but that's how I came across Small Giants, and we're 20 years into Small Giants.
Yeah, true.
So maybe for the listeners who aren't familiar with Small Giants, what is a small giant?
Well, the subtitle, it says it all, which is companies that choose to be great instead of big. And it's basically companies that have the opportunity to grow a lot bigger and get a lot, grow faster uh, you know, be a bigger company, but have other goals that they consider more important than getting as big as possible, as fast as possible, and they pursue those other goals. And so my question really that drove me through writing the book was, what was it that these other companies chose to go after, um, that they considered more important than getting as big as possible, as fast as possible. So these are companies that really are very ambitious, that want to aspire to be the best in the world at what they do. But all the companies that I wrote about, they measure their success based on something else, and the question that I asked and that I wrote about in Small Giants was, what is it that that they consider more important than growing as big as possible, as fast as possible? Since most people who start companies think that the whole idea is to get as big as possible, as fast as possible, and growth is very important, obviously. But still, these are companies that have chosen other paths that they consider more important. And one of the things that I in the other book that you referenced was the book that I wrote with Norm Brodsky, which was called originally the hardback was called The Knack. Paperback was the name of the column that we wrote in Inc. magazine. Street Smart.
Yes. Okay. So that's where the difference came in. I wondered about that. Right.
Yeah. In addition, I wrote another book after that called Finish Big. And it was really about exiting. And every entrepreneur, everybody who starts a business, everybody who owns a business, at some point leaves that business. And the question is, one of the things that I discovered very early on in writing that book was that most of the people who leave their businesses, well, I would say it's about 50-50, or it may in fact be different. That some of those people are, a very large proportion of those people are very, they're disappointed. They are unhappy with the result.
Yeah, I noticed that. I know you're working on a new book that we were talking about just before we started, but it seems to be this golden thread through some of the work that you've done, where the owner is really in touch with, the owner of the business is really in touch with what they want out of the business and the reason why they want out of
that's very true. And that's what I find interesting. One of the things that I found in writing Finish Big was I looked at companies that, there's this concept that I talk about in Small Giants called Mojo, which is I define as a business equivalent of charisma. In other words, when a leader has charisma, you want to follow him or her. When a business has mojo, you want to be associated with that business. You want to buy from it. You want to sell to it. You want to work for it. You want to be close to that business. And what I found was that the companies that I wrote about in Finish Big, well, actually, the companies in general that I wrote about, I looked very hard for companies that had this mojo and had been able to hold on to it with the passage of ownership. In other words, figuring that every buddy who owns a company is going to move on at some point. Nobody lives forever. Which of those companies are going to retain this quality that gives them their exceptional nature. And what I found was there were only two types of businesses that had managed to hold on to that quality, beyond beyond at least one change of ownership. To, it's possible for it to maintain that through one change, but to actually maintain that quality through two changes or more, was relatively rare, and there were only two types of companies that were able to achieve that. And one was family businesses, and the other was employee-owned businesses. And my theory was that characteristic that these companies had, the special, the part about them that that made them special, needed to have a protector. And that in the case of family businesses, the protector was the family, and in the case of employee-owned businesses, the protector were the employees. And they maintained the kind of the approach to business that had signified, that had really characterized the companies during their original, or during their great period. They had maintained that approach to business through, no matter who the leader of the company was. And the interesting thing, you and I talked about the book that, my next book, the book that is going to come out in the spring of 2025, called Another Way. And it's a book that I wrote with the founder organization called the Tugboat Institute. And this is a organization that's for, quote, evergreen businesses. That is, businesses that are built to last and last and last. And there's one company in the Tugboat Institute that's been around for almost 300 years. And that may not seem, for Europeans, that may not seem like such a long time, but for Americans, that's astonishing, since the country, is not even 300 years old. So the question with that company, and with all the other companies that are in the Tugboat Institute, is how do you preserve whatever is special about these companies, and how do you preserve that? One of the reasons that I got so interested in Tugboat was that these were companies that had managed to last for long periods of time, and the high percentage of them are family businesses. They've been handed down from generation to generation. And
what do you think makes them different?
What makes them? There are 7 characteristics that all of the Evergreen companies have. Let me see if I can remember them all. It's what we call the 7 P's principles. They all have a purpose for existing. That, if you ask them, why do they do this? Why do they build a company that's going to last longer than they are? They say, well, it's important because, and they say the what it is that the company does that's important to the society.
So the owner is very clear has that very clear sense of purpose, but also a connection to kind of a bigger purpose and why that company exists in the context of society.
Right. Now, the second P is that be people first. These are all companies that that regard their employees, actually all the people who they come in contact with, as very important, and who treat their employees particularly, and their customers, and everybody else who they come in contact with as very special. But they're people first. These are companies that are determined to last a long time through thick and thin. They persevere. That's the third P, is perseverance. The fourth T is that these are all private companies. These are not owned by the public. They are owned by private owners. Profitability. I mean, the profitability is, on the one hand, obviously they need the profitability to grow and to finance the companies, but also it's a measure of customer satisfaction. Basically, customers are willing to pay more for the products or the services that these companies provide. So profit figures that way. Venture capital-backed companies or private equity companies have to grow very fast, and are, their success is measured on the speed, on how fast they're able to grow, and that's because of the source of their financing. The venture capitalists want the financial result. The private equity people want the financial results to come as fast as possible. Whereas these companies, that is not important. Their growth appears over a long period of time. So they call that paced growth.
Okay.
That's the sixth.
So rather than growing for the sake of growth, there's this
paced growth.
Paced growth.
That makes them similar to small giants in that way. And finally, it has to do with innovation. These are companies that have what they refer to as pragmatic innovation. These are companies that not innovate the way that companies in Silicon Valley innovate, which is with, they have a good idea and they throw a lot of money at it. These companies do not innovate that way. They innovate based on the customer's response to whatever it is that they are trying to innovate on. And, basically the financing that they pay for their innovations come from the customers.
Yeah.
So
the innovation is very customer driven.
Are willing to pay for the innovation because it's valuable to them. So those are the seven P's: purpose, people first, private, perseverance, profitability, and
innovation. Just trying to remember how you described the innovation with a P as well.
Pragmatic innovation.
Pragmatic innovation, yeah.
And paced growth. And those seven characteristics define these evergreen companies. What these evergreen companies have in common And really, this is a whole segment of the American economy that the business press hasn't paid, and the business academia hasn't paid any attention to this part of the economy. But this is a very important and a big part. There may be, I mean, Dave estimates there are 150,000 companies that meet these 7P, meet these qualities of the Evergreen, these 7Ps of the Evergreen companies. The book, it really is about that. The book is about his identification of this portion of the economy which has not been recognized before. It was not recognized by the companies before. It was not written about in the business press. It was not studied in academia. It was not considered a major part of the economy, which it is, and that's really Dave's contribution. Is at first he wasn't sure that what he thought was important, what he thought was different about these companies, was it really true? Was it something that he made up in his head? The book is about his discovery of this part of the economy, which had not been written about, had not been studied, had not been identified before. And there's some very big companies that are part of this. I mean, they're not small giants by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, for example, which is the largest rental car company in the world. It owns National Rent-A-Car and Alamo Rent-A-Car as well. It is an Evergreen company.
So they keep thinking about how they sort of pass that purpose from generation to generation, leadership team to leadership team.
It's the connection, that stands out. I mean, if you talk with the leaders, of Enterprise Rent-A-Car, the leader of Enterprise Rent-A-Car, he will talk about what he learned from his father. I mean, his father founded the company, and named it Enterprise after the aircraft carrier he was
stationed on
during World War II. And he had this idea of we talk about in the book how he came to start this company, and he had to have a name for it, and so he decided to name it after his aircraft carrier, Enterprise, that he served on. Mostly these are not well-known companies, but some of them are very, very well-known. And
moved from generation to generation, like you were talking about.
Yeah,
the paper folks.
I'm trying to think of the wealth management and the wealth advisory service, which is all over the United States. In every time I go to get my hair cut, the opposite side of the street,
you see them,
is one of these offices. They're employee owned. They're owned by their partners, and basically the son of the founder considered it very important for the different partners in the different locations where these wealth management companies existed, for them to be part owners of the companies, and they are, and they realize that it's the generosity of the son of the founder that has made it possible for them to live the lives that they lead. So
presumably, many of those
we write about that, and we write about them in the book.
Presumably, those leaders, those owners, the founders of those businesses are thinking about succession and they're thinking about how to make sure the sense of purpose carries on from generation to generation.
You're absolutely right. This is something that they think about very early, and that they instill in the fabric of the company.
So if you're thinking like that as a leader, you need to be building that into the DNA of the business from the beginning, from
yes, exactly,
very early on.
Exactly. I mean, we thought that Cliff Bar was maybe going to be
one of those businesses.
Examples, but then Gary Erickson and Kit Erickson decided to sell the company. Is Patagonia one of these companies? I don't know. It's one of the questions that we have is whether or not Patagonia is really part of it.
I mean, if you go back to what you were saying earlier about how important these businesses are to the U.S. economy, and presumably the small giants as well, there's a lot of turmoil going on at the moment, and there's just a lot going on around us, and there are new challenges around things like sustainability and all that sort of stuff. How important are small giants and evergreen businesses, and how are you thinking about that in terms of the importance to the economy?
Well, I think that they provide a different model of capitalism than venture-backed companies or venture capitalists or private equity people. The qualities that increasingly young people, hate about capitalism are really the greed, the rapaciousness, the various qualities that lead young people, for example, to embrace socialism as opposed to capitalism, is because their image of capitalism is shaped by the qualities of the venture capitalists and the private equity, and those are written about in the newspapers and the magazines, and then they're portrayed on in the movies, in the stories, and
is that the same view you came from when you were young?
What?
Does that kind of a reflection of your feelings when you were young?
Absolutely. Well, I have a very unusual background. I have very particularly unusual background for, to be where I am. When I was young, I considered businesses to be the source of everything that was evil in American society or in Western society. And obviously, my opinion about that has changed in that there are some companies, small giants are one of them, the Evergreen companies are another, that represent the best in small business, or the best in business. And that you look at what they contribute to our society, that they not only provide great products or great services to people that people can buy, and in fact, the more that people value, they will pay more for the service or the product.
I saw that in Beryl Health and Paul talking about how big his margins were.
But in addition to that, are the many societies that I write about in Small Giants that basically treat their people. Small Giants is really about relationships. I mean, people ask me, to define Small Giants. I say it really has to do with the relationship that each of the companies that I write about in Small Giants, is very attuned to the relationship that it has with each of the groups of people that it comes into contact with, whether it's employees or its customers or its neighbors, where it does business to society, the suppliers, that every business is in touch with lots of people, and how it defines those relationships and experiences and manages those relationships. Really, that has to do with their greatness. It comes from the quality of those relationships that they have.
And the connection into the community.
What? I think that with both evergreen businesses and small giants, that people who built these businesses were not aware that they were part of a community when they started. And it's only now that they realize that there are other people who approach businesses the way that they do. And, that's why you have the small giants community where you and I see each other annually. And at the Tugboat Summit as well, where these companies are in touch with each other and are aware of the fact that they are part of a community. Before Dave invented, before he founded the Tugboat Institute, most of these companies were not aware that they were part of
like a community.
This community, or they were part of this segment of the economy that had a particular role to play. It's really Dave who has identified that and introduced them to each other to the point. I mean, there are companies like Radio Flyer is a member of the Tugboat Institute, but is exactly the kind of company that that Dave means when he talks about Evergreen Company, and it's owned by the grandson of the founder. Right now, there's a grocery store chain in the Midwest, which is really the model for Walmart in terms of creating its supercenters. It's called Meyer.
Yes.
And it's, again, it's part of this group of companies. Again, it's family oriented. It's the family which maintains the culture and the qualities of the company is famous for. It is neighborhood in among the people who know about it. I should say the Meyer people were not aware. They just ran the businesses the way that they thought businesses should be run. And
it's an
Jack
interesting
Beck
point.
in SRC, who's a member of Tugboat, he ran Springfield Remanufacturing because this was the best way that he could figure out how to do it. I mean, he basically believed that the company would be more successful if everybody understood the financials.
Yeah.
And, the challenge was to get people to be interested in it. And the way he chose to do it was to basically say that business is basically a game.
Yeah.
And we all like to be part of to play in a game, and we like to win. And that's what we're trying to do with our company, is to win this game of
business.
As a business. And
I'm curious, Bo, on that. So one of the things that I'm really curious about was the small giants and the work that you've done on the Evergreen companies is this unique sort of operating system that they have. So Jack takes over SRC Holdings and he has to figure things out. And he comes up with the great game of business over time. And then I look at companies, some of the small giants like Anchor Brewing, for example, where there's their own way of operating, and Cliff Bar, Zingerman's. Then there's some companies who use systems like EOS and Great Game of Business. Do you think those systems have a positive or negative effect on that unique kind of approach to running a business small giants have? Or
the Great Game of Business certainly does, because you cannot practice the Great Game of Business without feeling that it's very important for your employees, that basically your employees will be better off and will have better jobs and will know what's happening to them and will know what's happening to the business if they know everything that's going on. EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system that Gino Wickman really invented and has promoted, answers a need that many people who start companies have, which is a need to understand, how am I supposed to run this business? And EOS basically says, well, you've got to do this, this, or this. And it's a good system, but it's different from the Great Game of Business in that EOS is very effective at giving people the tools that they need to run a business. Exactly how they use those tools, the kind of culture that they create, the kind of relationships that they have with all the people involved in building the business. It's not part of EOS. They have to bring that to the business itself. And there are a lot of companies that practice EOS and also have the Great Game of Business, also do the Great Game of Business. But there's a different emphasis for the two ways of doing it. I think that if you look at the origins of EOS and the origins of the Great Game, they were different. The origins of EOS was Gino realized that people starting businesses, entrepreneurs, have no idea what they need to do in order to build a successful company. And so he thought there are certain commonalities that all businesses have, and that you can develop that into a kind of an operating system that people follow in order to build their companies. Jack, the origins of the Great Game of Business are different. Good. When he and the other people did a leveraged buyout that created the Springfield Remanufacturing Company, their idea was there's no reason why everybody shouldn't be owner of this. We're all going to work together. We all have to work together in order to make this successful. And why aren't we all owners? Why shouldn't we all be owners? And then after that basic feeling on his part that he discovered the ESOP, employee stock ownership plan that Congress has set up that offers various tax advantages to these companies that are owned by their employees.
And that's something, presumably, that's critical for companies that are looking to be evergreen, that they're structured in that manner through an ESOP or employee perpetual trust or something along those lines. Or
yes, although it's not true. Some of the evergreen companies, their ownership might be in the family. In other words, the family owns, or it might be in the employees. There are different ways of
structuring that. And going back to what you said earlier, they're either employee owned or family owned. Is that the big split? The majority of those evergreen companies are either employee or family owned.
Right. You raise a good question, which is, which I don't know the answer to, which is, if you're a family-owned business, can you include the employees as owners of that family-owned business?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. I know that there are family-owned businesses that become employee-owned.
But whether it can go, whether that other sort of dynamic is theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the book comes out next year.
It comes out in the spring. It should be out in the spring.
It feels like there's almost a bit of a trilogy going on here. So started with Small Giants. Succession.
It's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
That's what holds them together. Especially, I mean, as somebody who was as a youth, as a student, was incredibly anti-business, anti-capitalist. The idea that these, obviously I look at the socialist companies of the world, and they've all failed. They aren't, they're dictatorships now. They do not. I mean, these are things that I puzzle about and that I think about, which is what capitalism allows for. It doesn't require it, but it allows for the use of the intelligence of the largest number of people in order to solve various economic problems that arise. And, the socialist countries haven't figured out how to do that. I mean, when I say socialist, I mean the Soviet Union and China and Cuba and so forth. I mean, the theory that the proletariat would rule the society, but that's not the way it's turned out. It's turned out that, in fact, a small group, a relatively small group, has taken the power for itself, and they call themselves the dictatorship of the proletariat, but they're not. They're intellectuals.
Yeah.
Who've created these societies that are not, they're not free, and they don't really utilize the wisdom and the imagination and the innovation that individual people are capable of, and that's what's possible through capitalism.
Yeah.
And it's possible. It doesn't necessarily happen that way, but it's possible. And there are some companies that really try and utilize the intelligence of most of the people in their organization, in order to create the most financially successful business organization that the company can be. That was Jack, that motivated Jack Stack from the beginning, really. His goal has been to create a business of business people where basically everybody in the business is a business person. Everybody who works in the company is a business person who understands what it takes for a particular business to be successful.
So it's so important to grow those people up to really understand how the business operates, how the business works, if you want to win the game.
Exactly.
To understand those rules. Yeah. So I just thinking, going back to that question about how important these businesses are. I mean, you came from a way of thinking to join Inc. magazine and become somebody who shone a light on entrepreneurship when it was kind of a dirty word. And it's quite ironic from where you came from. But as you look to the future and the businesses that you write about, and the importance of founders and business owners who are very clear on that sense of purpose, where they're going and why they're going there. How important is that in what's happening in the world around us at the moment?
We don't really know. It's something that's being that will be worked out over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And whether or not it develops a political manifestation, whether or not it becomes a political movement, I don't know if that's the case. But basically, in order for it to become important for the society, it needs to develop a political component to it. And this way of running a business would have to become important to the governing of the society. Now, is that the case? We haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
And will we see it? Will it ever be the case? I don't know.
So that is this mindset of building an evergreen business, a business that is going to be transferred from generation to generation.
Right.
A sense of purpose might evolve, but how important are those institutions going to see or view those kind of businesses? And how much support are they going to get?
Right.
What's some advice for listeners kind of thinking along these lines and where to start?
I think so. I think there are different ways. Why do people start businesses? For different reasons. Businesses is on one level, it's a simple thing. It's a group of people who try to create a product or service that other people want and are willing to pay more than it takes you to produce the product or the service. That's your profit. It's basically, profit is a kind of applause. And in the course of doing that, in the course of supplying that to lots of people, you wind up hiring other people to help you create it. And that poses all these questions about how they work together and how they relate to each other. And I don't think it's been clearly worked out yet. Mark tried to define a way to do it, but he was very much affected by the circumstances that he found himself in at a certain stage of capitalism. It's you look at the great thinkers of the economy, Adam Smith and Karl Marx and some others. Obviously the founders of the United States of America, brilliant people, obviously, because they were able to, among themselves, to work out a set of rules that are embodied in the U.S. Constitution. And that set of rules has kept the United States going for almost 250 years. And, I don't know. I get lost in thinking about this because the founders of the United States couldn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
Couldn't know the long-term effect of what they were doing. But they believed that there were certain rules, there are certain ways of forming a government, which is totally at the time, it was, there wasn't anybody who had formed a government that way. They took their inspiration from the Republican important philosophers who had effect in that, John Locke and so forth. And, will this way of running a business somehow that the founders of the United States created a company where people could use their native ability to build an economy as not perfect. I mean, obviously, there are things that happen that are not so great. I don't know. It's beyond me. It's it's interesting to think about,
Yeah.
interesting to talk about. Gives people like you and me the opportunity to think about how all this fits together. That's fun to do.
So what's some advice you sort of think you'd give to business owners as we close today? What should business owners be thinking about right now, Bo? All the wisdom that you have.
Business owners there's a phrase that Jack Stack refers to as one of the higher laws of business. He's noticed in the great game of business that there are certain higher laws. And one of the most important higher law is you gotta wanna.
Yeah. You gotta wanna.
And I think that's number 6 or something like that. And the most important thing for business owners to think about is, what do they want to create? Do they want to simply create a business that allows them to get rich? Some people do. There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
But there are some people who have got higher goals, who not only want to benefit financially as a result of running the business, but who also want to create a kind of a society, mini society, that operates according to certain rules that they consider better than, or they consider the right way that people should relate to each other. I would encourage entrepreneurs to be part of this conversation and be part of this figuring out how to make these things work, which involve doing a lot of reading and doing a lot of, obviously when you're building a business, your focus is on building a business and making it successful. Yeah. And that takes up a fair amount of your time. But the point is that there are choices that you make, and it helps to understand, because it's easy to make those choices without ever realizing why it is that you've made that choice, or even you may make a choice without knowing that you've made a choice. And I think that for business people, what's key is to figure out, identify the choices that you have to make, and then to make them the way that you believe ought to be made to create the greatest happiness among the people involved.
I suppose, as you said, that this is something that's ever evolving, and there are communities out there that you, as a business owner, you don't have to be feeling alone, whether it's Small Giants or Tugboat or the GGOB communities. These conversations can carry on. You can have these conversations within these communities. It's something that keeps evolving. So good advice. So one last question: what's next after this book?
I haven't a fancy idea, but you've given me some. Actually, this conversation has given me some ideas about directions to go, and I would thank you for that.
I'm glad that it is. Thanks, Bo. I appreciate that.